Hello, and welcome to Leveraging the System of Work, a podcast all about how businesses can overcome challenges to achieve successful large-scale transformation. I'm Alexis Williams, Head of Strategic Alliances at Atlassian, and today I am joined by special guest Max Furmanov, Senior Managing Director at Accenture. And together we are sitting down live in Las Vegas from the AWS reInvent Conference. Hi, Max. Welcome to our podcast here in Las Vegas from reInvent. How are you?
Thank you, Alexis. I'm great. Great to be here with you.
So, Max, can you just do a quick intro for their viewers?
Yeah, sure. So, Max Furmanov, based in New York City with Accenture. Been with Accenture for 25 years, and I've done a variety of things, but today I run our cloud advisory business.
Awesome. Well, welcome, and thanks again for joining.
Yeah, great to be here.
So excited to be at reInvent. There's been a lot of buzz this week here in Las Vegas, as there always is. This is my 9th reInvent.
Wow.
Obviously, the largest cloud providers conference, and so a lot of cloud, a lot of AI. What are some of the main themes that you've heard from this week from the Accenture perspective?
Yeah, so, well, being part of our cloud business, I've been to many of these as well, and one of the things that amazed me this time, and I think every time, is this conference just gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. I was here before COVID, and it was massive, and I thought, we'll never get back to that number, but we seem to, at least it feels like we've surpassed it. So you walk around, and it's incredible how many people are here and how much excitement there is, how many new things. They've got digital floors laid out this time. There's some crazy stuff going on.
Slides going down.
That's right, there's slides on the staircase.
I didn't do it, I'm not brave enough. But
I was tempted. Someone in front of me in line did it, and I was like, okay, maybe that's the better way to go down.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so I think that there's just been, as always, there's been a lot of buzz, and I too came, I think, the one right after COVID, and it was definitely pared down, but I do think that, to your point, we're way back to those numbers. I think what I wanted to spend some time talking with you today around is really cloud migrations and customers on their journey to cloud migrations and transformations. For those that are stuck or stalled, what are you seeing as far as why that's happening? Are there any common themes?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I think what's really interesting is we're kind of at a very pivotal moment, I think, for cloud. Last couple of years have been about migrations, as you pointed out, right? So we've seen a lot of clients just figuring out, how do I get to cloud? How do I get to cloud? And I think right now what we're seeing is those strategies, those agendas are changing. And organizations, well, first of all, they're looking at the stuff they've migrated to cloud. And they're saying, I didn't necessarily get value out of cloud that I thought I would or that I expected. They're also realizing they have stuff left behind that they couldn't have gotten out maybe as easily as they thought. So inevitably, what we're seeing is that migrations are changing to include a component of transformation that is not just technology driven, but business driven, right? So that's the first thing I think that's really important that we've seen, especially in the last 6 months, maybe as much as a year, is organizations are starting to incorporate transformation components into their migration. And as a result of that, they're kind of stepping back and saying, well, what should my strategy be, right? How should I think about cloud? Do I go all in on cloud, right? Because that was seemingly where organizations were headed. They're now saying, well, maybe there's some things I need to do on-prem, and the things that I put into cloud, what's the business value of putting it into cloud? What are my business drivers for doing that? So we're seeing a transformation really embedded into their strategy, and the whole cloud strategy being reevaluated, right? Organizations are almost stepping back and saying, my cloud strategy may be something I've fallen into and not intentionally planned. Right. So let me revisit that now. And I think as a result of all that, we cannot forget that this is not about just tech. In fact, I think in most cloud migrations and transformations that we're engaged on, the technology part is almost the easier part. The harder part is people.
It's the humans.
Right? It's the humans. And organizing and structuring a transformation, making it effective. Majority of transformations fail for organizations, right? And so they're really doubling down on thinking about how do we transform the organization, the operating model, the talent alongside with it. So those are some of the trends we're seeing, and then we're also seeing stuff around AI, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, I would love to. I think we're seeing the same on the Atlassian side. From the perspective of maybe customers and clients not getting the value that they initially expected out of cloud, why is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you always have the hype curve, right? So, cloud was very, very hyped, and organizations had unreasonable expectations that are being kind of resettled now. But I think, it's fundamentally a technology problem.
Yeah.
When you take an application that is not designed to be elastic, that is not designed to be, going offline when it's not being utilized, right? If it's not designed to do that, it's not going to start magically doing that in the cloud, right? You have to redesign those things.
Yep.
So it's fundamentally a technology problem, and I think a lot of organizations did a blind lift and shift into cloud and are now saying, okay, and maybe I did get some value out of that because I was able to reduce my data center footprint or maybe even close data centers, but now I want to take the next step. I want to transform those things to really take advantage of cloud. And not even just the basics of cloud like compute and storage, but also the innovation that is in the cloud, right? And capabilities like you guys are, bring to the table in the cloud that really provide tremendous additional value that you don't take advantage of unless you redesign your processes, you redesign your applications. And I think that's the journey organizations are starting to go on now.
Yeah, I think something that Atlassian, we were in New York City, I think this was about 9 months ago, and we were together talking about systems of work, and it was fairly new on at the time. But really what that is and how I would describe it to my kids is you have, a big box of different toys. You've got your cars and your houses, and, it's great to play with them separately, but when you put them all together, it just makes it a lot more fun, and you just have more people using those those tools, and so hopefully it's more than my kids that are watching these podcasts. So for the more sophisticated viewers, the Atlassian system of work is really a strategic initiative that we have designed to unify Atlassian's products into a comprehensive system that truly guides organizations and how they should be using those tools and offerings across teams. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how do you view Atlassian systems of work in the context of driving cloud migrations? Because often it's not just let's go head on into the migration to solve this smaller business tooling problem.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I think the biggest problem is the organization and the operating model around these transformations. It's not necessarily the technology itself. And organizations are used to working in silos, and I think I love your analogy of having all the toys together, right? But not just having them together, but having them integrated is what can power and enable the transformation, right? So I think organizations need to fundamentally organize differently, follow different practices to drive an effective transformation, and that can be powered by tools, right? And if those tools are integrated and if those tools work well together, they can really power the transformation. So I've said this to you many times before that I never. We've been partners for a long time, and I've been part of this, the work that we're doing together for a long time. And I never go to a client to sell systems of work. I go to a client to say, look, you've got a problem in transforming and how you transform, and there are tools that can enable that. So we start talking about the challenge around transformation, and I think the systems of work tool set is a really powerful foundation for orchestrating how that happens, and that's a major challenge organizations have.
Yeah, and it's really too aligning all of the people, because at the end of the day, to your point, I think I was asking this yesterday, why is transformation just so darn hard? And it's really because of the humans. And so what do you see as maybe some of the biggest ways to overcome the humans in all of this? I know Accenture has got a massive program and offering around change management.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that there's any one thing. I think it's a combination of, change management. It's a combination of thinking differently about talent. I think it's also organizing differently, right? One of the big trends we're seeing is a shift to a product model type mindset. I was just with a client where, we're doing a lot of work to help verticalize the way they do operations, right? The way they run support. And that takes, different mindset, different set of practices, different set of tools, and you can really power that by a strong foundation. So I would say it's a combination of that change in organization, operating model, and talent that we're seeing as a key success factor in driving successful transformations.
Yeah, and you guys do it like no other. So I think that
we try.
You try.
We try.
So another area I did want to dig into, because you were talking about some of the 5 trends that you saw Accenture really sees. Gen AI and AI in general, very big topic. What we're starting to see is how AI is becoming the pull for cloud, and it's driving, and it's becoming the entry point for cloud migrations that maybe were stuck or stalled. And so are you seeing the same, and what do you think is really driving that?
Yeah, you can't go any conference today especially reInvent, without
Yeah.
talking about AI and Gen AI and seeing that everywhere. And I think, this is another area where I think we're at an interesting pivotal point, right? We've done a lot of Gen AI work, right? We've done a lot of AI work, but we've done a lot of Gen AI work, specifically in the last year, and we've published some of those numbers publicly about, how much work we've done. A lot of that work over the past year and a half has been around proofs of concept and prototypes, right? So organizations have started to really play around with Gen AI, and they're saying, okay, can I apply it to, my marketing, or can I apply it to how I engage with customers, for support, or, in the call center or whatever, right? But a lot of that has been proofs of concept and prototypes. It's in a walled garden. It is not integrated to, their business processes. It's not integrated from a data standpoint. It's got its own data set. And we've shown a lot of success conceptually in what we've been able to do. And I think now organizations are starting to say, okay, I really want to put this in use. I want to put this into my business process. I want to put it out there to my customers. And as they do that, they're realizing that, wait a second, my systems are not integrated. I can't get data to Gen AI in real time that it needs to be effective, to pull out account data, or whatever it is. And so I totally agree with your point around AI pulling, cloud and transformation, because organizations are now realizing, wait a second, I need to go and build a bunch of stuff to enable Gen AI. It's not about Gen AI, right? Yeah. Most Gen AI programs are not messing around with LLM, language model algorithms, right?
Right.
They're actually figuring out how to get data into those things as input, and how do you integrate on the return, right? And so it is really pulling transformation work. Right.
Yeah.
And this is another point I was thinking about when I think about systems of work is, you have an integrated tool set which also integrates data, right?
Yes.
And a lot of Gen AI use cases are actually applied to the transformation process, right? Organizations are thinking, how can they drive transformation more effectively? How can they apply Gen AI? And they need data for that. And having an integrated data set is really important for Gen AI, and that's why it kind of pulls a lot of the foundation work that you need to do.
Yeah, and I don't ever really like talking about products or tools on the podcast, but I do think that, you're making a very relevant point around Atlassian Rovo. One of the use cases for it that we really see that strongly resonates is really around that seamless data synchronization. You've got, it just facilitates, the seamless synchronization of all of the data that sits within, the systems and products on the Atlassian platform. And I think that becomes critical in the efficiency of the migration process, and becomes something that is game changing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in this business for more than 25 years, and I've seen a lot of technology waves, right? We've seen, the shift to client server, if there's watchers you have that are old enough to remember that. And we've seen, a shift to microservice type technologies. We've seen blockchain and metaverse, and quantum, and AI, and now Gen AI. And the thing that's been constant across all of these trends of technology and implementation of them is that organizations have an issue not with implementing the technology, but with getting data into those technologies, right, to drive business value and drive business use cases. That continues to be the constant, and it's a huge issue today, as it always has been.
Yeah, I'm excited for where Rovo and AI is taking us. I think there's a lot of positive there. I do want to talk a little bit about execution too, because I think that's really critical. Oftentimes you've got all these strategies, and you have to align all the people to the goals, and the execution piece, is that in any of the trends that you're seeing of customers really struggling with that side?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think a lot of transformations fail because not because there's no business value, or not because you don't have the right engagement, because of execution, right? And I'd say there's a couple of things that I see on the execution side that are challenging or causing challenges. One is the interaction between technology and the business, right? Most organizations still have technology and business operate in silos, and those that have started to integrate the two are far more successful. And if you look at the digital natives, right, you look at the Netflixes of the world, they often don't have a separate IT from the business, right? It's a single end-to-end team, and I think a lot of traditional organizations are starting to shift that way precisely because I think that's one of the failure points, right, is that integration. I think another one is, around, again, not having a solid foundation underneath, underpinning your process as you transform, right? How do you think about, managing value from idea to implementation, right? How do you prioritize? How do you drive all those things? And that's where I think a platform, an integrated, data-driven, platform that drives that is very powerful because, so I would say those are the two things.
Mm-hmm. And how can customers and clients think about transformation from a more work backwards perspective? Oftentimes they're coming at it from, well, if we move to the cloud, we'll get more innovation from the cloud. And oftentimes that's not necessarily all that compelling. They can just continue to sit on data center. And so what does that work backwards where it really becomes compelling for them to finally make that move over? Do you think that there's anything?
I think organizations that are out there setting an objective for themselves, like, hey, I want to use, X, Y, or Z tool. Like, I want to get into cloud. That is not a recipe for success, both from an implementation standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, right? I think organizations that are saying, I want to achieve these business outcomes, right? And then work backwards from those are the ones that, are more successful in transformations. So, if, technologists may want to get into cloud, right? Yeah. But from an organizational business standpoint, you should ask yourself, why am I getting into cloud? Is it to reduce cost? Is it to adopt some kind of an innovative capability? Yeah. And often the answer is not, what you would expect, right? Like for example, I've got a client in the healthcare space, and they do a lot of research, right, on clinical and drugs and things like that, and they're finding that in the cloud, there's capabilities that can drive analytics for them that they simply can never invest enough money in themselves to create. Wow. So they're not in the cloud because they want to cut costs, or they're not in the cloud because they have some technologist on their team that's excited about AWS. They're in the cloud because there's innovative capabilities in the cloud that they cannot get elsewhere, right? And I think that's the right mental model to think about. And cutting costs is also a perfectly valid business objective, but you just need to think about what are the objectives for why you're adopting a technology, and cloud is no different than anything else.
Do you see there being a trend of you're more successful if you're business led with the transformation versus like tech led?
Yeah. It has to be a joint effort,
yeah.
right? You're never going to be successful as getting to the cloud just for the tech, and you're not going to be successful if the business doesn't have technology on board. So this needs to be, and that's where I think this pivot we're seeing to an integrated business and technology teams focused around product is driving a lot of success because it brings the two together.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the system of work philosophy, because it really, one of the core components or aspects of it that I think really helps with the execution side is that alignment and tracking of goals across teams, and I think that's been a big miss for a lot of companies in struggling to actually execute.
And actually, my favorite thing about what you're talking about is very simple. It's just establishing common language between the teams. I can't tell you how many organizations I walk into and I go talk to the technology guys and they say, well, we know products, we have a set of products, and I go to the business teams and like, well, we also have products, we understand products, but then when you bring them in the same room, they have a different definition for what a product is, and certainly different products in mind. Yeah. And having a foundation that brings together terminology and allows them to say the same thing without even doing anything else, like that in and of itself will drive success.
So I think that common lexicon piece is super interesting. It sounds probably very simple, but in practice, I imagine it's probably very hard to do, and I actually have seen teams struggle with it. So how do you and Accenture approach that? I mean, this is no easy undertaking.
Yeah, it is hard, and most organizations don't do it well, right? They don't have a common glossary established across, and that's frankly one of the reasons I have a job is, right, our team spend a lot of time helping establish that, and creating that and then utilizing it throughout your transformation process in a consistent way allows teams to just be more effective together, right? Achieve common goals, have common objectives, those kinds of things. But it is difficult, and it is what I think a lot of the effort, tends to be. So we always, when we think about transformation, we think about tech, we think about, coding things and, deploying things into cloud, but a lot of the work is actually around structuring people and organizing people and developing common language as part of that. So.
How long do you think that realistically takes in in a large enterprise to really do that start to finish?
Well, I think, for a large enterprise to do it across everything they do is very difficult. So what I tell clients is start in a small area, right, and build on that success, right. So I have a client now where we're doing this across 20 of their business domains, right, and we started in one, and we scaled that to 2 and 3, and only after getting 4 or 5 right are they saying, okay, we're now going to expand this more broadly. And this could be a multi-year process, right? It doesn't mean that you will not see any value until the very end of it, right? You can structure it in a way where you realize value. In fact, I think you have to structure it in a way where you see value, along the way. But it is a journey for most organizations, and it's a cultural change, right? Which takes time.
From a just business outcomes perspective, I mean, I imagine it accelerates execution, but what have you seen as sort of when done successfully, what does it truly drive from a business outcomes perspective for clients?
Well, I think first and foremost is it achieves the business objectives you set out to achieve, which many transformations do not, right? And that's first and foremost. And then secondly, yes, of course, it's about acceleration, it's about efficiency, it's about doing it, better, faster, cheaper. But first and foremost, it's about actually achieving those goals, which many transformations don't. So this is critical.
Yeah. And so I do want to go back to the AI a little bit as well. And so, we're talking a little bit about the seamless data synchronization. How do you, from getting teams organized and being able to really leverage AI to, more seamlessly and efficiently go through the migration process, how do you really see that process playing out?
So, data is a massive problem in organizations today, right? Both transactional data as well as data that supports business processes and execution of things like transformation. So, from a transactional standpoint, I've got clients who, all have a customer and their systems have 15 representations of that customer, none of which align, right? So from a transactional standpoint, that's a massive technology challenge. It's a massive organizational challenge. Very similarly, on the execution side of a transformation, they're struggling with understanding what their throughput is, what their capacity can be, right, for running a transformation. Where their work products are and what are the relationships between them, right? So I think, and they're looking to apply Gen AI to their execution process, to accelerate it, to, do it more quickly, get to market faster. But data is a major struggle. So if you can have consistent data, right, across your value stream, right, and have that data integrated, it is a very powerful tool to accelerate your transformation, and organizations massively struggle with that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about AI is it's only as good as the data that's feeding it. And so, one of the things about the system of work philosophy is really having this connected portfolio of products, of which there are a ton of data just within Atlassian alone, like that sit within that portfolio of products. And so I think that common data model is one area that we try to drive to really have the best set of data possible for AI.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And also, I would add that being able to plug things into that process that is not part of the systems of work, right? That's data that the organization might have and want to utilize is also very important. And I think the systems of work concept does that as well.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think maybe just a couple more questions here, but you talked earlier about one of the trends that you saw was that when it comes to cloud migrations or transformations, really starting with a bigger level goal and really trying to drive it towards a more transformational type program. Can you say more what that really looks like?
Yeah, I think that again, when I go and talk to organizations and I talk to clients, I'm never starting the conversation with a product. Or a tool or cloud or the Atlassian suite. As much as I love all of these things, we start with understanding what the challenge is, right? And inevitably you get to talk about what the foundational components are to address the challenge, but you have to start with the challenge. And so, it is very natural for us to come in with a tool or a solution, right? But I think most of the time that is not the most effective way to help organizations. You have to, really understand what is the objective they're trying to drive, right? And then how these different, tools and products and solutions can fit that. So we have to sort of, invert our thinking a little bit and how we drive this conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is one of the areas that I like about the system of work, because it does just do that. You're not just coming in talking about Jira or Confluence. You're really elevating, and I think then that becomes more transformational. And frankly,
it's a concept, right?
Yeah, and it drives more value and outcomes for the customer versus,
Yeah.
okay, great, just moving a tool to the cloud, we don't know if that's super compelling for us.
That's right. But when you do that in the context of a business challenge that's being solved, now suddenly you've got the attention and the interest of the audience.
Love it. Well, that was all my questions. Thank
Well,
you so
great.
much for joining me. It was always good at talking to you, and really appreciate you taking the time to be on our podcast with us.
Yeah, great to be here, and hopefully I'll see you next, maybe at the Atlassian team event.
Team in Anaheim.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Max. Thank you for joining us for Leveraging the System of Work, a podcast from Atlassian and Accenture. Thank you as well to our special guest, Max Furmanov from Accenture, for sharing his insights today. You can check out more about Max, as well as the work Atlassian and Accenture are doing on large-scale transformations, using the links in our show notes. We'll be back with more conversations soon. Follow us now in your podcast app, and you won't miss an episode.